Muted.
behind this was to reduce the amount of lead being put into the environment. Because remember, lead never goes away, it just settles into the soil. It comes out of the paint, and it turns into dust into the window sills or on the floor. And then when it's ingested into the body, it just stores itself in the bones and the muscles. So, exposure comes from human activities such as the use of leaded gasoline, some types of industrial facilities, and the past use of lead-based paint in homes. Lead from paint, including lead-contaminated dust, is one of the most common causes of lead poisoning. If paint is in good shape, the lead paint is usually not the problem. It's deteriorating, meaning peeling, chipping, chalking, damaged, or damp lead-based paint that is a hazard and poses a threat and needs immediate attention. Areas in the home such as windows, window sills, doors, door frames, stairs, railings, banisters, and porches are found to be locations where a lot of friction occurs, thus creating lead dust that children and adults. Renovation and house repairs can create toxic lead dust when painted surfaces are disturbed or demolished. So why is it important to test for lead-based paint? Well, the number one reason is to prevent lead poisoning. Lead exposure, even at low levels, has a significant negative impact on health and educational outcomes. In children, lead is most damaging at the age of 6 and younger, because at that age, bones are still growing, muscles are getting stronger, and many connections are being created in their brain. Lead, instead of essential nutrients, are available to the body to make bones, muscle, and brain connections. Permanent harm to health can occur. Even at low levels, lead can be harmful and be associated with things such as learning disabilities, resulting in a lower IQ, attention deficit disorder, behavioral issues, nervous system damage, speech and language impairment, decreased muscle growth, decreased bone growth, and kidney damage. Investing in the prevention of lead exposure and improved housing quality will yield improvements in educational outcomes. Now we'll look at a few frequently used terms. The first being abatement. It means any set of measures designed to permanently eliminate lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards. And by permanent, they mean an expected design life of at least 20 years. So abatement includes the removal of lead-based paint and dust lead hazards, the permanent enclosure of encapsulation of lead-based paint, placement of components or fixtures painted with lead-based paint, and the removal or permanent covering of soil lead hazards, and all preparation, cleanup, disposal, and post-abatement clearance testing activities associated with these measures. All right, so containment, the physical measures taken to ensure that dust and debris created or released during lead-based paint hazard reduction are not spread, blown, or tracked from inside or outside of the work site. Following levels, which are used to determine whether deteriorated paint is a hazard that must be addressed. 20 square feet, which is 2 square meters on exterior surfaces, square feet in any one interior room or space, or 10% of the total surface area on an interior or exterior type of component, all surface area. For example, window sills, baseboards, and trim. Hazard reduction, defined as the measures designed to reduce or eliminate human exposure to lead-based paint hazards through methods including internal controls or abatement or a combination of the two. Internal controls is defined as commonly defined by the U.S. EPA and HUD and many state agencies as reduce early human exposure or likely exposure to lead, including specialized cleaning, repairs, maintenance, painting, temporary containment. Paint stabilization, repairing any physical substrate of a painted surface that is causing paint deterioration, removing loose paint and other material from the surface to be treated, and applying a new protective coating or paint. Risk assessment, an on-site investigation to determine the existence, nature, severity and location of lead-based paint hazards, and the provision of a report by the individual or the firm conducting the risk assessment, explaining the results of the investigation and options for reducing lead-based paint hazards. Standard treatments, hazard reduction measures designed to reduce all lead-based paint hazards in a dwelling unit without the benefit of a risk assessment or other evaluation. And lastly, worksite, an interior or exterior area where lead-based paint hazards reduction activities take place. There may be more than one worksite in a dwelling unit or at a residential property. Now we move on to HUD and city regulations. Requirements regarding lead-based paint are based on the dollar amount of hard construction costs or the dollar amount of HUD funds, whichever is less. There's three category limits. You have up to $5,000. In general, paint testing and safe work practices are required. At between $5,001 to $25,000. In general, a risk assessment and safe work practices are required. At $25,001 and above. Safe work practices and abatement are required for any amount. Also note, clearance is always required when lead hazard is reduced, affecting more area than the de minimis. So we have some examples here. One homeowner repair project is using $4,000 in CDBG funds and $3,000 of the Housing Trust Fund, which is local money. This job will fall in the $0 to $5,000 level of lead care. Second example, a home down payment assistance grant of $10,000 is being used to purchase a house. This use of HUD money is exempt from subpart J because no hard construction costs are being incurred. Lead testing and reduction costs are all eligible for CDBG and home expenses, provided there is sufficient backup documentation and expenses were incurred in the current time frame or the correct time frame. Next here we have a picture of the form. This is the lead tracking form. This form is to be used on any construction or repair project that gets funded with federal funds. So this would be the form that you would take a look at and use to track your lead. All right, so now we'll take a look at the general work process. This is a general flow chart of kind of how things will go. A property is determined for rehabilitation by the project sponsor. Once that is done, we move into an environmental review request. It's submitted and an RCA returned. Then a city rehabilitation specialist reviews and approves the work specifications. After that, the property owner receives copies of the EPA lead-based paint pamphlets. LTF is signed. So once you get the copies out, then the LTF needs to be signed at that point, stating that the pamphlets were handed out. Then if the repair is exempt, there are no further lead requirements. So if your project is exempt, then you don't need to go any further than that. But if it's not exempt, then for non-exempt repairs, a risk assessment is completed or lead paint is presumed throughout. Have a risk assessment done, or you just assume that everything is lead-based paint. After that, the repair is completed using lead work practices and or abatement. I refer to the city policy and procedures. After that, following repair, a lead clearance report must be ordered and passed. And at that point, the lead tracking form also needs to be signed. After that, the property owner is given copies of the clearance report, a work write-up, and any change orders. At that time, the LTF or the lead tracking form is also signed. After that, the property owner receives a copy of the lead tracking form, and the project sponsor keeps a copy for the client files. Okay, so there are a few exempted, actually 13 total exemptions. So here are two examples. One, if a residential property for which construction was completed on or after January 1, 1978, so meaning if the house was built after 1978, which banned the sale of residential use of lead-containing paint prior to 1978, earlier date as HUD may designate. Also, any rehabilitation that does not disturb a painted surface. You can find the other 11 exemptions by clicking on the link below. Okay, next here we have the Rehabilitation Construction Approval Form, the RCA. The RCA should be signed by a rehab specialist after work specifications are approved. If lead-based paint is encountered, a rehab specialist must indicate that on the form. If work specifications are revised due to lead-based paint, the project sponsor must resubmit specifications, and the rehab specialist must approve them and sign the RCA. Now we'll take a look at the process. This is the lead flow chart for projects. You can identify a home unit for repair assistance and apply for it and secure an RCA from the City of Indianapolis, which was that form we just previously looked at. Using your lead tracking form, provide the owner with the required disclosure pamphlets and have owner or future owner sign indicating they received the pamphlets, the tracking form in your file, and use along the entire process, obtaining signatures as appropriate. Note, the tracking form will be required with the final claim, so we will ask for that at the time of the final claim. Now, 3, you're going to write the work specifications with estimate. 4, we move into working with the city rehab specialist, determine if the job is exempt from the HUD lead safe rule. So it would be one of those 13 exemptions we mentioned earlier. If it is exempt, you are finished with lead, provided you gave the pamphlets to the owner. If you're not exempt and the estimate is $5,000 or less, paint test in the work area. Or this is a rare situation when presumption is acceptable, then use SWP and get clearance in the work area only. Standard work practices is what SWP stands for. Not exempt and over $5,000 in a dollar, send specifications out for risk assessment. 5, provide a copy of the risk assessment to the owner or future owner and use the lead tracking form to obtain their signature. If there is an existing owner, provide a copy to the owner within 15 days of the date on the risk assessment. So you need to get the homeowner a copy within 15 days of when it was done, when the risk assessment was completed. Number 6, incorporate all lead findings from the risk assessor into the original work specifications and have the city rehab specialist sign off on the revised specs and estimates. Number 7, you're going to send specs out to bid to certified licensed lead contractors and keep copies of their certificates in your office file. So you want to make sure you keep a copy of their licenses on the in your files. Over $25,000, you must be a lead abatement contractor. The state of Indiana has a listing of them. Remember, you have great liability and therefore need all the evidence possible in your file showing that you followed the HLSR, the lead safe rule, and took care to protect the occupants of the dwelling. Great. Monitor construction to see that the contractor is using safe work practices. Number 9, when the contractor informs the project sponsor they are finished, make an on-site inspection with the specifications in hand and check for all work complete and satisfactory, consulting with the owner if existing, then all building permits are obtained and on-site for the inspection. And when the project sponsor is satisfied that the contractor is finished, contact. Just one moment. Okay. I'll just start with 10 again. When the project sponsor is satisfied that the contractor is finished, contact your city rehab specialist to perform a punch list inspection.
I keep doing that. We apologize.
All right. So number 11, when the punch list is completed, call the city rehab specialist for a final inspection. 12, have the contractor obtain clearance. When presenting the certificate of completion to the rehab specialist for signature, provide a copy of the front page of the clearance report showing past clearance. All right, so here are some general notes. For most projects, when over $5,000 and a dollar, obtaining a risk assessment is preferable to presuming lead because the presumption option brings with it standard treatments. Familiarize yourself with standard treatment, and you will see why it is a more expensive proposition and contains hidden costs that you might not be able to afford at the back end of the job. Regardless of presumption of or risk assessment, language must be included into the work specification addressing same. There are two situations when a presumption might be appropriate: $5,000 and less, or a full gut rehabilitation over $25,000 and a dollar. Over $25,000 and a dollar requires abatement of all lead hazards found and or created during the work. All right, so now we're going to take a look at a couple of frequently asked questions. First, why is it so very, very important to first write work specifications, then provide them to the risk assessor? So when under $25,000, if the intent of your efforts are rehabilitation rather than purely lead hazard reduction, even though you're using an abatement technique, you are not required to use an abatement contractor or workers. And when under $25,000, if you were to send the risk assessor to the property without specifications in hand, any hazard found that you choose to reduce using an abatement technique would in fact require you to hire an abatement contractor and workers. Next, after having a risk assessment performed based on the specifications I provided to the risk assessor, may I always address every hazard found by the risk assessor? The answer to that is yes. You cannot pick and choose certain hazards to correct, but not others. All must be addressed. On the other hand, if the cost to correct all the hazards would be so great that you lack sufficient funds or it exceeds your program, you may elect to do no work at all. It's an all or nothing situation. Of course, you must provide the pamphlets and deliver the risk assessment to the owner, always getting a signature for your file. Must the project sponsor keep copies of the lead training and certifications for general contractors and workers in office files? Yes. All lead training certificates and certifications must be available for inspection by city staff or HUD or EPA or even the state of Indiana Lead in Healthy Homes program. Project sponsors assume liability when working with activities that reduce lead hazards. Therefore, they need in their office evidence that qualified and lead-trained companies and workers were hired to do the work. May untrained workers, such as homeowners, enter the work area where lead paint is being disturbed? No. Only properly trained and certified persons may enter the work area prior to passing clearance. All right, if I understand that housing for the elderly can be exempted. Can housing for the elderly be defined as any unit where any elderly person lives? For example, a single-family residence that receives home repair assistance? No, housing for the elderly means retirement communities or similar types of housing reserved for households composed of one or more persons 62 years of age or more, or other age if recognized as elderly by a specific federal housing assistance program. What trainings and certifications do the contractors and workers need to perform lead hazard work in the state of Indiana when using HUD, CDBG, or home funds? Interim control. For interim control work, below $25,000 per unit, all workers on site must have the EPA Certified Renovator certification and training, which is a one-day course. Or if workers are not trained as certified renovators, there must be a lead abatement supervisor on site at all times to ensure safe work practices are being implemented. For abatement workers over $25,000 per unit, there must be at least one lead abatement supervisor, which is a 4-day course, and must pass a third-party state of Indiana test on site at all times. All workers must be abatement lead workers, which is a 2-day course. No third-party test is required for that certification, trained and certified. Reminder, in general, most homeowner repair projects will be below $25,000 in hard CDBG construction costs. All right, so next here I have a list of additional resources that you can use for the lead safe rule. We have a link to the lead safe housing rule, Then we also have guidelines for evaluation and control of lead-based paint hazards in housing. Chapters 1 through 18 from the guidelines with detailed, comprehensive technical information. So that right there is the end of the webinar. Now, if there are any questions, please type those in the chat box.
If nobody has any questions, I'm just going to pull up our lead tracking form that we had mentioned. Oh, that went away. Okay, so this is our lead-based paint tracking form. This is actually a combination of, I think, 3 or 4 older forms that we had required in the past. So basically, step 1 here is, this form is made to guide you in the lead-based paint tracking process, and it'll prompt you when to stop, when to continue on, and basically, gives you a good idea of where you need to be in the lead-based paint tracking process. So step 1 here is basically just identifying the structure itself, the property owner's name, whether or not the structure was built after 78 and therefore exempt, as well as spots for signatures. So you'll see below this step 1 here, if the structure was built after 1978 and the line above was signed, stop and leave the remainder of this form blank. This just means that this house is exempt from the HUD lead safe housing rule. You don't need to do any lead-based paint abatement on that house. If the structure was built before 78 or the above line was not signed, please continue on to step 2. So step 2 basically is certifying that you have given the homeowner the 2 EPA pamphlets regarding lead-based paint and all the hazards involved. And then we'll need a signature there as well. For step 3, basically this just identifies any exempted repairs. You can always consult a rehab specialist if you're not sure if this repair is exempt. There's a list, as Amber mentioned, of about 13 exemptions that we provided a link to in this presentation. So if this is an exempt repair, please check yes and write the exemption down. If it is not exempt, please circle no and continue on, as well as sign the form. So in step 4 of this lead tracking form, it prompts you to either assume that there is lead throughout the house, which we kind of frown upon because it might require some unseen costs, or it requires you to do a risk assessment on the house. And this, again, risk assessments can be paid for under any CDBG eligible cost. So again, it just wants you to get the risk assessment and then provide signatures from both the project sponsor and the property owner. And from there, all the work will be done on the house. Any change orders will need to go through, and then you'll need to order a clearance report. Once that clearance report is passed, you'll need to sign this 5th step here, just detailing any dates of the work write-up, the change orders, and when that clearance report was passed, as well as providing the contractor contact information for the homeowner, and then finally some signatures here at the bottom. We got a comment in the chat box that someone could not see the form. Is anybody able to see this form?
If you're unable to see the form, it is posted on our website and will be made available as well. You can also email us a copy of the form to be able to see it.
So if you were not able to see the form, I apologize. That's on our website, and I believe we sent it out in the email. And if you have any questions on that, you could just send that our way, and we'll try to answer those as quick as possible. So if anyone has any questions about lead, any lead renovation requirements, please put them in the chat box. If not, we'll conclude the presentation. All right, we're not getting any questions here, so clearly we've done our job.
One last comment is, again, just a reminder, if you are seeking to expend over $25,000 on a CDBG homeowner repair project, to fill out a template that we have on our website for a waiver for $25,000. From that waiver, we will send a response back to you. Until you get that response back, please do not begin to incur those $25,000 on the property. It's not something that we want included in the claim. We want to know about it before any of the work is actually done on the project to ensure that everyone is following.
All right, thanks everybody for attending, and have a great day.